spot feels fitting.
Yeah.
I feel like with whatever we talk about today, I like where we are. Shout out to Russell. Thank you for letting us use the space. We're at the line for his residency, and as you can see, there's a lot of terrific things here. So appreciate you. Actually, you were talking about just now, asking me what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, I see you jump up out of bed and put on your painting clothes, and I don't even know what you do, actually, because I'm still sleeping, but what, like, gets you jump, like, into that zone in the morning?
Yeah, I think when I know there's a deadline or a challenge far off, I feel like I'm more motivated to kind of, it's like having a purpose in a way. Mm-hmm. But I do like, it's like maybe like the little kid in me of just jumping up out of bed and just kind of like, almost as just like a burst of energy. Kind of like a cartoon. I think maybe that has some sort of lasting impression on me. It's just kind of like going from 0 to 60 as like a little kid does. Mm-hmm. But I think also a small thing that I've noticed recently is I just like to go to the kitchen and open the curtain over the sink. Mm-hmm. I think there's something about that.
Let the light in?
Yeah, letting the light in, and I'm in the kitchen, and it's just facing east. So like I see the backyard, I see like the studio immediately, I see the grass or just a bird sitting, that little mohawk bird that lands in the yard sometimes. And I think just instantly I'm just like, okay, I know what I need to do next to get to the studio eventually. And yeah, I think just those moments of just like waking up in almost like imagining myself in like some sort of cartoon-ish world where I'm just like, boom, open the eyes, boom, out of bed, boom, walk the way to the kitchen, open the curtains, boom, sun hits me. Mm-hmm. And like, I just kind of like a plant just like come alive or something. And then I'm also seeing the studio, so I'm just like, okay, in my mind, I'm gonna get there at some point. And having like a good list of coffee to try is also exciting, because now I get to do like some sort of process with my hands and my mind, and getting a really good cup of coffee is like my reward. And then I get to sip that, and then I feel even more alive, and then I like make my way outside and get to the studio. And so, yeah, I think there's like almost like a fantastical movie that I'm making, or animation that I'm providing my psyche to like get me psyched up, basically, to get into the studio. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and the earlier the better. I think there's something about waking up and it's like dark outside or like cold outside, and like that brisk reminds me of like the Jamaican mountain weather where it's just like cold in the morning and you just get outside and you're not chilly cold, but you're just like a certain temperature where you're just bracing the coldness, and there's something like resilient about it. Like you took the challenge on to get outside, and it's cold, but you're in it, and it just feels good.
Is it like, do you feel like that? I mean, okay, you're already painting because you're like in finishing mode or whatever, but does that make you feel like in the mood? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there some, like that morning, something about like that brisk morning time that, do you think that like that feels like a good time to paint, or like to be outside, or?
I never really think there's a good time to paint. I think there's a good time to get in there. And I think that's most of the battle, is to get in there. Yeah. It's almost as if I know once I start, I'll have a good time. And it lets me look at that as like, I can start anytime, which takes me further away from starting. But the battle is to like get in there and get started. So I think having specific activities that I do or tasks that are geared towards me starting is much more important for me.
I guess, I don't know, because I'm thinking about, like, I, like to paint at night mostly. I would like to paint in the daytime, like with the light coming in. That's something that I'm trying to do, but really I always end up painting at night. And I realized recently, like, I think my brain is different at night. I realized, like, oh, similar to like how they say like people buy things at like 2 a.m. because there's like a part of their brain that's turned off or something like that. I realized, like, I think that there's something happening to my brain maybe that's making it like easier for me to like not second guess things, like kind of get into a flow. I'm kind of like, whereas sometimes for me, like at maybe not necessarily like morning, but like midday, if I went in at like 12 or something, it's like I'm too cognizant of everything, of all the news, of all the things like tasks that day, and then just like my brain is like alert to those things where it's kind of hard to just fall into a zone. And I don't know.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying now. Yeah, I think there is something about painting at the earlier parts of the day before people are really awake, or the majority of people are awake, and then the end of the day when the majority of people are sleeping. I think there's a certain comfort in the solitude or the understanding that not everyone is awake. And so it's easier to kind of like sink into your world, your own world that you craft, and less distracting things to take you outside of that. So I guess, yeah, it does make it easier to get into the zone, at least for me too. And it feels like it's softer on the acceptance whenever it's like early in the morning or later at night. I feel like I'm more willing to say like, okay, this is fine. Maybe it's because I'm not so antsy that I can, just look at something and be like, oh, I don't need to like take an extra effort and like almost like add more than I need. Because maybe it's like more of a time for me to just like sit with it a little bit longer. And I think the night kind of offers that space to feel like it's okay to sit with the painting.
I feel like the paintings too that are showing at Frieze, like they feel like they were made in the early morning or late night kind of thing. They have that kind of like quietness to them, and like like a quiet moment, with this one specific object or person or something like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think that is very true. I think there is something about when I was painting them, the feeling of my memories were mostly quiet or mostly soft or like a cinematic quiet. And it's almost like it's like when someone gives you room to think after saying something profound instead of like following up with another word. It gives you time to like really absorb it in that space of quietness. And so there was a lot of time when I was painting that I would make these images and I'll step back and allow it to feel, or allow it to kind of fill that space for me to understand what it was. And not just the object, but beyond the object, like how did I paint it to match the feeling that I was trying to get at. And because it was also night most of the cases, you know, I could almost like physically put that painting into, like, implant it into the memory of this time that I was living in Jamaica, or this moment of the day that this event was happening, or this force of nature was happening. Like, it almost gave me like a one-to-one where I could, here is a wall of memory or feelings in memory, and here was the painting, and it was almost like I could paint something and hold it up to this wall and be like, does it match? You know? And I think just that time of day gave me that ability.
Yeah. I'm thinking too, like, as you were speaking, I was thinking about seeing you out in the garage working, and how you like, because it's kind of a small garage, so like to get some distance from the painting and to look at it, you step to outside the garage, looking through that little window. It's like a open window, right? There's open air that travels through it, but there's like wrought iron or something through it. So I saw you sometimes from the kitchen window, you know, standing there outside looking at the work at a distance through the little window. And I feel like, I don't know, something about that too feels like, yeah, this like quiet kind of personal, I don't know, I almost wanted to say like confessional or something about that like intimate small space, like through a little window, right? Like, I don't know, I think that to me kind of like, something about that, like I feel like it's tied, it's all tied into the work.
Yeah. So you're spying on me. But you know, I liked this new studio is interesting. I think every studio brings a certain way to interact, or a certain activation for the artist. And I remember the last show I did, my studio was just my dining room that I just converted. And that had its own like feel to how I painted that body of work and how I saw those works. And this studio also felt like that too, where that little window gave me a way to look at to view the paintings at a distance, but also as if metaphorically through this time machine of a lens. Because I was almost like outside the studio, which felt like my mind or my memory bank, or like the world of where my memories are like living and like forming or coming together and like revisiting. And it was like I was able to step outside of that and like view myself from the outside, almost like an out of body experience by just looking through that little window. And that was really interesting. Things just looked different. Things registered deeper. I was able to finish most of the work through that little window. You know, most of the work, you need a distance. And I think just like going outside of myself to view the work, I was able to see like, yeah, this feels like the memory that I was trying to chase. So yeah, I think there was something about that I didn't think about until now. So I'm glad that you saw that, brought that to life. Is there something like that happens with your space? Because you're also in a little box, and I feel like that box is majority windows. So
I realized, so my previous studio space, I realized I had more room, but I mostly worked kind of in a small area, and I realized like, I don't actually need that much space. I need space to store, but like the actual working area. But what I've noticed where I am now in that little back room is I get a lot of color ideas through like my periphery vision. And so I have all these like half done small paintings lying around. that sometimes I have to keep where they are because I'm like, oh, that one is reminding me that like there needs to be a red. Like I'm working on this painting, but I can see this red over here because I have this red book or red painting or something, and it's making me see like that I need something to balance it, you know, something like I realize there's all these like I usually get a lot of color inspiration from just like the periphery things, and I'll like see a combination and I'm like, okay, I gotta try to recreate that or something.
Yeah, it makes sense. I've noticed like you're much more an artist with references in plain sight, as if they're like sketches in a way that kind of work themselves back into the painting at some stage where they need to be. And yeah, it's really interesting to see it because I used to think you were like taking moments to really like look at these and like read them and then like go to the painting, but it sounds like it's just more so they need to exist in these places while you're working on these. So like when you veer off and glance to the rest of the room, something will catch your eye that leads back to it. I was like, I needed an answer, and the answer was this like corner of a page that was just happened to be right there, and I can bounce off of that and come back.
Yeah, I think that like the visual is helpful, like the visual reference or like suggestion or something.
Suggestion is a nice word.
It's nice because sometimes I'll be working and I'll be like, oh, this I want to put like a purple, but I don't fully understand like there's so many purples, you know, there's so many ways that you could make something feel purple, or it's like it's like that might not be enough of a like directive or something, and I need the visual to be like, oh, actually this purple is really like vibrant or energetic, and really what I wanted was like this vibrancy, or like this is really a dusty color and I actually want this like dusty matte feel or something. I don't know, I just feel like sometimes like I need the like the suggestions have more information, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, than what my mind might think.
Yeah.
I'm trying to fill in a space with, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like I've been studying that like component of your process, and I feel like I also remember conversations where you looked at my work and based on like the relationships of where certain colors neighbor other colors, you've like pointed out how it leans towards like a different hue based on just that specific relationship than when I like mixed it individually. And I think that's been seeping into me because in this body of work, I feel like I've been noticing it more with the light that I paint under in the daytime, at night, mixing the color on just the palette board or putting the color on the painting, and finally like hearing your voice in a way of like, this color looks so bright on the palette, but when I put it next to this like dark brown or this dark blue, it just looks so different. And I have to almost like talk myself out of this idea that this is the right color on the board, and really remixing it to feel like this is the right color for the rest of the painting. And there's been a lot of letting go of really beautiful colors that I've mixed on the board because they don't work for the family that's existing already on the canvas. And I think I can attribute to that, of just like hearing you speak about how color relationships form and their position on the board on the canvas, and how that like reads on a general scope. But yeah, hearing how they kind of come from the reference points that are like lying around, and how those aren't necessarily this one-to-one of like a color that you want to mix, but more so of a feeling of how they exist on the book or in the book, and like how it couldn't even be that they mix that specific color, but maybe the printing process of making that color for the book added a whole other spectrum to that color, and then you're seeing that instead of the actual color they mixed, and that, you know, like twice removed color from the actual painting is the color that you actually need for this painting. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Okay, so I'm curious about, so you recently found the term intuitive Jamaican artist, right?
Yes.
And so like, I know when you found that, you felt like you hit on something that you, like it really resonated with you, right? So why is that? What does that mean? Or like, what do you find about that? And why does it resonate?
So there, you know, a friend of mine, we talk every Thursday, and he's from Jamaica too. And it's been great to just have this weekly meeting with a Jamaican that stayed on the island longer than I did, and is a little older than I am, and able to almost like share knowledge and access certain truths to the island that I just don't have and am seeking. And just to have someone to bounce that off of has been tremendous for me, to like almost like discover more and more pieces of me on the island. And one Thursday he just was talking about introducing my work to another Jamaican collector, and the collector asked if I was a Jamaican intuitive artist, and I was like, what is that? And, you know, I've heard of intuition, like women's intuition, like my mom used to talk about just like her intuition and things, and just always knowing something. And so I had heard that before, but this was just felt like a label, and part of me wanted to reject the label because I just, labels. And, but I looked it up, and as I was reading it, I was like, dang, this is me. Like, and Jamaican intuitive artist is a self-taught artist from Jamaica that usually paints from this reservoir of like a deep knowing of the cultural lineage, the kind of like belief systems, the norms, the religious aspects. There's like almost like a deep understanding from ancestral places that can't necessarily be explained with like, you can't really learn it. It's more so like you're just painting from a place that just you're not in control of, but it feels like it's coming from your previous self, like you've been here before sort of thing. You're pulling from ideas and a feeling that like there's Africa, there's indigenous, it's just something that you're pulling from that you just don't realize that you're making work about this subject, this particular deep understanding, this deep knowledge, this deep knowing. And it's like you can't really describe it, but you feel it when you see it. And the Jamaican National Gallery has an exhibition. I forget the guy's name. I can't remember it right now. But there's a current exhibition that's been there, I believe, since the 60s. And I wanted to go see that exhibition because there's all these like Jamaican artists that have become part of this exhibition because they're making work that speaks about like the island itself, like the different complexities of the island, the food, the belief systems, the church, the cultural, the terrain, the people, the just like the lore of the island is embedded in this like intuitiveness of this art form. And when I look at the work that I've been making, when I look at like some of the ideas I've had in the past, and they've been imaginative to me, but I think there is a strong sense of purpose within that imaginative world building. And when I read that definition, I was like, this is where it's coming from. Yeah, I might be making up these faces, but all these faces feel like people you've seen in Jamaica or like people you've come across in the diaspora at large. And, you know, it's, I'm not looking at any specific reference point. I think they're just like exuding from some deep understanding of who these people are, why they look the same, why they feel like they've lived a certain life. And, you know, it just goes beyond a surface level of creating a person, creating a portrait of a person. There's something deeper in their eyes, in the way their posture is, and how they are holding something, and the way that their gaze is looking at the viewer, where they're situated on the canvas. I feel like there's something else guiding my hand when I'm making these images and choosing these colors and choosing the narrative of how these people are coexisting in the canvas or in the frame. I even think about how I'm shooting photography. Like there's a feeling that I'm striving for, and I know when I have it. And I think the only way I know that I'm getting these feelings is because it's coming from that deep knowing of what makes this so powerful when I'm capturing it. And yeah, I just think I've found a home for my identity as an artist in that like under that umbrella. And so I want to learn more about it. I want to immerse myself a bit more in it, see how deeper I can get, see how much more of like my memories I can like translate through that vehicle, and see different ways I can expand it. Because I think there's also like some of these artists are from Jamaica, born and raised. Some of these artists are just of Jamaican descent. But I know that there's folks that have my story of like migrating from the island as a young kid and then like developing a second identity wherever they move to, and then growing up and trying to balance both of those identities and making something of a hybrid. So I want to explore that component, that art, that angle of it. So yeah.
Do you think that there's going to be people viewing the work who, well, first, I'm sure there'll be some folks who maybe know Jamaica, maybe know a little bit about the Jamaica that you're from, and like might feel deep resonance, or maybe not even from Jamaica per se, but somewhere similar terrain kind of thing. But do you think that there will be folks that know this surface level Jamaica, right? Maybe they've been a couple times to a resort or something, like that will have certain associations with the island, and seeing your work. And I'm just curious, like, have you thought about that? Like, is there sort of this like, I don't know, I was gonna say like education of, or like introduction of like something beyond this like surface level, or like just what are your thoughts around that, of kind of like showing this Jamaica that you know that might be different from like the quick like thoughts of like I'm going to a beach paradise or whatever.
Yeah. What I'm hoping that is understood is that I'm painting an honest piece of Jamaica that is honest to me as a person that lived there for the first 8 years of their life. And majority of my family is still there in the same area. And I'm also painting, I think, for people that across the board that have this understanding of whenever they see their place of origin depicted in public, there's usually the pandering to the side that is most beautiful and most welcoming, and like a certain palette that is made or designed to show like this propped up version of the place. And to me, I think there's like a little bit of there's a lot of dishonesty in that. And you know, I've always had an issue with tourism in Jamaica, and just like foreign influence. I think there's I believe that there's a lot of damage that has been done and still continuing to be done in Jamaica. And so I think it was important for me to paint something that was honest to my memory and my lived experience, and also a place that would show a side of Jamaica that feels like this is the rest of the island that is also Jamaica, that is void. Like you can actually get the real food, the maximum amount of spice that's supposed to be for you to enjoy it and like feel like you're actually eating the food of Jamaica, or you're getting to be in the country with the people and you get to like actually see how the terrain looks. You actually get to feel it. You get to feel a slice of life that is not propped up to look good for tourism. It's just how it's supposed to be. Like you get to like meet someone and get invited. You get to actually see food get prepared with like tools that feel like they were made by hand, or they were chiseled by hand, or like you get to see someone in their work clothes that's just like coming straight from farm. You get to see the remnants of what their job actually is. You get to see their hands. You get to see like the strength in these people's disposition of just how they are resilient. Like you get to actually just feel who these Jamaican people are. And there's something beautiful for me to just like only paint that perspective, because I don't fit into the other perspective, and I feel like it would be dishonest for me to paint something that I'm trying to like show off versus like painting something that this is literally what I lived in. This is where I come from. This is like the real, honest depiction of where I live. So yeah, I think people will see this and feel something, even if they don't understand on the surface level what they're looking at. I think there's something that we as a diaspora have shared collectively that I think will resonate, and that's good enough for me.
I also I was just thinking yesterday about how like, I don't know, when you're in painting mode or show mode or whatever, and you're still gathering ideas, and so I feel like there's like a problem you're solving, or like a necessity for things, and sometimes when you're in that mode, like answers or solutions to problems kind of just like get attracted to you. It's like your mind is looking for certain things, and then you pick up things that cross your path. I'm saying this because I'm thinking about the painting. I don't know what you ended up titling it? The like Jesus one.
Oh, the portrait?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called?
I came home and there he was. Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, so, I was reading this book, The Passion of Images, which is very dense. It's interesting, it's really dense, but, I knew that you were kind of referencing this, like, religious backdrop in Jamaica, and so in the book there's this, it's talking about like the prototype or of the history of the icon, the creation of an icon, and it's saying its prototype was the Mandalorian. Is that it? Mandalorian. Christie. So that this. That, right? And so I knew you were kind of maybe curious about that, but I think I showed you this image, and if you really like.
Yeah, I saw the image in that book, and it just hit me like that's the icon that I want to reference for this particular piece. And there was a certain way that this icon of Jesus was looking, and also it looked like he had dreadlocks.
Yeah, I know. That's what was
locks,
what was really interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a drawing that had like locks,
like full on lock, and it didn't. And I think again, like that was like something that I wanted to really put in the frame, just like here it is, was because it was like a nod to the catalyst that began like my critical thinking and like our journey at large, was just like my grand uncle who got me into art, Uncle Amesley. I used to call him Uncle Rat, but like he didn't live with us, but he would come down again from like higher up in the mountain every now and again to visit. And when he wasn't there, I feel like I just looked at his work all the time, and he used to just draw these iconographies of Jesus, like a Rastafarian version of Jesus around the house, like on the walls. And I used to come from church, Baptist church, where I didn't really want to be. And I'll come home and I would see these like images, and like that would just be my classroom almost. Like I just would study these and like, why are they here? Why do they look like this? Why do I feel drawn to these?
Because he was
images?
drawing.
He was just drawing them, like these just small iconographies. Okay. And they were on like almost all the walls in the space. And I guess like my grandfather, who was like more Baptist, and my step grandmother was Baptist too, like they just allowed it. So I didn't see any issue with it, but there was something about just it being on the walls, it being a drawing, it being by him. There's all these things, and it just felt like I was drawn to this without understanding why. And there was this encouragement away from that depiction and encouragement towards this blonde, blue-eyed Jesus that I was learning about in Baptist, that I just had no relation to. Like I felt I didn't know why my body was rejecting it, but I was just rejecting with every fiber of my being. Like, this doesn't feel, this just doesn't feel like me. There's something about this, and so like it was almost like a default for me to go home in the comfort of my home and see this image that felt like me, that felt some sort of resonance to it. And so when I was making the piece and I saw that depiction of Jesus, it just synced up so beautifully that I wanted to do a version of it. And I did do a large version of it, but then I was just like, ooh, this feels like menacing for Jesus to be this large on a canvas, and just like looking at the viewer just felt like Jesus, bro. Like, You know, so I felt like I started to think more about it, and I started to see like I was looking at a lot of medieval illustration manuscripts before I started the show, because I thought that's where the direction I was going to go with the show was to like flip manuscripts. And because there was just all these beautiful compositions of how those manuscripts were drawn and the colors and just like this wild world that medieval times was. And I was just fascinated by it, and just fascinated by how Jesus was used, or how religion was used, and like the design behind this like triangle in composition, this like Holy Trinity, like manipulative use in design. But I was fascinated because I just understood what it was. And I wanted to create something about that. And so I think the idea evolved, and it whittled down to this, like, I just want to use this depiction of Jesus as like something to draw forth. And I loved how the halos were always drawn. And so I thought like maybe a smaller version could carry the weight of this larger feeling of what Jesus was to, or still is to, a lot of people. And I started to understand like, oh, there's a reason why these manuscripts are small. And it's almost like a counterbalance to the idea of Jesus being so large, that you feel almost like at a neutral ground, because you're using this large idea and you're communicating so small. And that led to me making that piece. And it felt like I was just doing a zoomed up close up of what was already on the wall. And I was able to like flesh out certain tones that made it feel like this realer version of a human, that didn't feel so removed from the rest of people, that it just felt like he had these like blemishes. He had a certain like way that he was looking up. His skin wasn't polished. There were certain like defects. There were certain like, I don't know, like I love when paintings have a certain natural vibe to them, where, you know, the way the shoulder drops, or like the gravity that informs how a posture feels in a plane. I think I wanted to add that to it, to give him some sort of like non-holier than thou, but like this is someone that exists in the same realm as we do. And I was able to achieve that. And I look back at it and I feel like it just feels good. It feels like I did those depictions on those walls justice with it.
Yeah, I really like that piece. And the one similar to it that's with the book on the bed that also has the little wall icon.
Yeah, the bedroom piece.
Yeah.
I think that was also a great thing to do, because that was like me talking about the conflict that was inside me of like having a certain like two worlds existing in the same frame, the Baptist and the Rastafarian.
Yeah.
Both having similarities within the same, they're like almost parallel belief systems, with different colors and different trajectories. But I saw the parallels and I saw the differences, and I think that was me like dancing in between those and like, here's both of them.
I think it's kind of crazy how like so much, you know, they say like before 8 years old you're really a sponge, right? Yeah. And so I think it's crazy how there could be such visual influence from some things that are seemingly insignificant, but can have like such a like make such an impression on a young person. Like I really like Gauguin, and I feel like I'll look to his paintings, you know, for reference. But I'm pretty sure it's because my mom had a Gauguin poster in her bedroom that I, you know, grew up seeing from a really young age, and it's probably just like, you know, embedded in there, and I feel like that's probably, you know, you grew up seeing your uncle's you know, drawings too.
I think also, in addition to seeing them, I would just sit there and absorb it for a long time at times. I feel like I just loved dissecting, analyzing in my observations. And I feel like I made time to sit with it and let it like plant roots within me. And so that I would always remember it. Like I almost wanted to create a certain relationship or a certain impression that felt like I could revisit this as a story. And this was like developing like a way to remember things more clearly. And I would always try to imagine myself in like a story or a movie or some sort of like fantastical way where I could develop a certain narrative for how I'm seeing this image, or I don't know, like whatever impressions, something funny, something quirky, something like so weird that it would make me kind of laugh to myself about how I remember it.
You mean looking at the drawings, or
I would almost like study them, study the drawings, study the way people were moving, study how someone's face looked. Like everything I chose to absorb, I would try to like find the anomaly in it and blow the anomaly up so that I would remember it better that way. And I think I just matured with that same formula.
Do you feel like you did that too? Because you also watched a lot of cartoons when you were young in Jamaica, right? Do you feel like you were doing that?
I was definitely doing that. I would, you know, it was like blow the anomaly up, go outside and practice it, and then develop a physical fingerprint for it, you know. And, but it was just so helpful because when I lived in Jamaica, I spent so much of my time outside. I didn't want to be inside. I didn't want to take naps. I was constantly trying to explore more things, see more things. You know, it's almost like the formula was so exciting that I couldn't sit still. So I wanted to absorb and I wanted to test it out on different things, on people, like, you know, and I think that constitutes how I approach my work, whether it's illustration or photography or painting, is I want to like remember things in a way that the feeling of that anomaly that I picked out is the reference point for a lot of things. To my detriment, I don't like taking notes, and I feel like that's also like a weird crutch because like I feel so strongly about how I was able to remember something that I try like to not muddy it with like note taking. And I think it just kind of comes out as like a fantastical, whimsical version of a memory because that's how I remember it. And so certain people have larger noses or like larger chins or like, but I think that's what made their personality matter to me was like that anomaly that was beyond like the symmetry of something.
Do you remember like, so I know you drew in school, like you've told me stories of like competing with other, right, kind of competing with other like classmates who could also draw. Did you do any painting?
I didn't do any painting.
Okay.
I felt drawing was quicker for me to get the idea out. Painting I wasn't well versed in the practice of a brush.
Yeah.
I think a pencil, eventually like a pen became like my main thing. I love pens. And I think drawing just had like an ability to convey an idea real quick and I can move on to the next idea and to the next idea.
Very smooth with the pen.
And and I think that was also because I love the challenge of learning something to put me in a place where I didn't have any weakness. And I don't remember how I came across just the pens, but I remember the idea of not being stumped and how I enjoy this idea of making something out of nothing, and the idea that a mistake could lead me to the final result.
Yeah.
And once I latched onto that, I feel like I just didn't care about mistakes in the same way that most of my peers cared about mistakes. I didn't want to erase it. I felt like every possible mark was on purpose, and my mind made up all the scenarios. It was like I was giving myself a blueprint to make everything possible. And once I developed that, the pen became like the best way to make that happen. And so you can erase with a pen, or most pens. And that gave me like, I can't turn back. That means I can only go forward. That means everything that I make can be great. Like this crude line can be the best line. Every flaw can be the best part of the drawing.
Yeah. I'm like realizing that I because I didn't use pen very much at all. Like, of course I took like drawing classes and I've always doodled and stuff like that, but I started painting like young. Like I feel like that, like my first memories of making art has always been painting, like finger painting. You know, when my mom was working, and then in like when I was 4 in kindergarten, my dad would walk me to school, and the first like 30 minutes or 45 minutes of school was like painting session. And so like the parents could linger, and so my dad would sit with me, and he'd usually paint someone from the newspaper, and I would paint something, you know, on like the little easels. They had like little tempera paint stuff. But I realized that was like, I started with a brush, I guess, kind of first. And I remember the first painting that I made, I think my dad still has it. It was this guy's face, and it was really memorable because I had so much fun doing it that I didn't want it to end, so I painted over his nose over and over again. So his nose is like painted really.
Which is so interesting because your style, when you get to the faces, I think that's really where I can see that you're getting at something that's beyond the surface. There's like there's some personality that I think you're able to get in your faces, and maybe it leads back to that moment. Yeah. Having fun and like figuring out what you want the face to like say, and not look like, but like say, you know. And I think there's something cool about that. Thanks. I also think too, like how you started with painting. I believe you're much more of a painter than I am. I feel like I'm more an illustrator that's learning a new medium in painting. But I think when I think of a painter, I think of you in that you're making the painting. You're not like applying a topical thing. You're like making something, hiding it, bringing it back out. Like there's a push and pull to arriving at the final image, you know. And sometimes with illustration, I feel like I used to just do the line art and then color it in, and I felt like there was more just applying the top only. You know, I wasn't like pulling something from beneath a surface or a layer of something back up to, you know, the top, and then like making something else from it. And I'm learning that now, and I think I've learned it with this body of work, but most of it has been just like looking at your process and seeing how like you're not just painting something, you're like making it. And there's an extra level that you're taking that I feel like you're witnessing when you see the final result. You can't just put this specific color on something and that's it. I feel like the color that you're seeing on the top is a mixture of like colors beneath it, colors that have been, painted over, or at different drying times have been like informing the top color. And I think that's what a painter thinks like in a way. And you understand how the paint moves and reacts to the brush, to how the image needs to be conveyed. And I think there's something about it.
Thank you. I feel like I'm still learning that, but that's kind of what for sure is exciting. Like sometimes that's what's so cool about seeing work in person, because you can love a painting and see it in a book and be like, I love this color and how, this is working with this. And then when you see it in person, you're like, oh my God, this color is that way because it was actually blue underneath and then they put the orange on top, you know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and without, sometimes that gets lost in the printing, but I realize like I love that kind of thing. Like when there's, like getting at colors that you can only get at through like a physical, interaction.
I've noticed it on skin when I'm painting skin. I feel like, because most of my registering of color on skin comes from photography and just film in general, and realizing like skin is not just like whatever gets you to see brown, is not just brown flat. It's like a multitude of like people's like blood vessels, like color, and it's just like great to like form the final color from a buildup of other colors working in tandem with each other to get to what you see. So I think it's great. I think it's beautiful to see your work do that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we could probably be here all day talking. Is there anything
we could
you want to cover before?
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I think
Get a sandwich.